Thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm Hiroshi Ozaki. I'm the director of the ML CFT Office, CFT Policy Office in Japanese FSA. And it is my great honor to be invited here to speak about the regulation landscape for virtual asset service providers. And I'd like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation on all staff at Regulation Asia who worked on today's summit. The virtual asset sector is the first moving and technologically dynamic, which means continuous monitoring and engagement, both by the public and the private sector, is critical. But let's start talking about what happened in Japan in 2014. It was a Mt. Gox hack. Mt. Gox was launched in 2010 and was, at that point, handling almost 3/4 of all Bitcoin transactions. In February 2014, it filed for bankruptcy after losing 850,000 Bitcoins in hack, which would be worth nearly $40 billion equivalent at today's price, I guess. But even at that time, it was also a substantial amount, was around $450 million equivalent. This resulted in catastrophic losses for the exchange users. The exchange was only to recover 200,000 Bitcoin in its vaults, which was less than 1/4. In response to this bankruptcy of Mt. Gox and part of virtual currency guidelines in 2015, Japanese FSA amended the payment service laws and the Act on Prevention of Transfer of Criminal Proceeds in 2016. It introduced several regulatory requirements into virtual asset sector for the first time in Japan by requiring entities that sells or buys virtual assets to consumers as a business to register with the financial authorities and imposing obligations such as the segregation of customer assets, identification of customers, and transaction monitoring. Following the Enactment and Amendment Act in April 2017, JFSA established the BASP monitoring team in August 2017, composed of the ML, CFT, and technology specialists. As part of its registration procedure, JFSA assess applicants' ML, CFT programs with a focus on consistency between the applicant's risk assessment and their business plan through document-based assessment and off-site or on-site interviews with them. The review process will begin for applicants who would have prepared all required documents. It generally takes about 6 months for the approval process, but it varies from case by case. And currently, 30 BASPs registered in Japan as of today. In 2020, when the Payment Service Act was revised, the advertising and solicitation of the virtual currency was also regulated in the Act in order to prevent from the false representation, exaggerated advertising, and nor the encourage of the speculation. As the ongoing monitoring of the registered BASPs, we annually collect MLCFT statistical and qualitative figures and data from registered BASPs for FSA to conduct risk assessment on them. And we develop a schedule of annual offsite and onsite monitoring. The source of data collected from the obliged entity is around 60 or KPY. For the BASP sector, we collect the information such as the blockchain analysis tools used for the transaction monitoring, and the number of the STR submitted, the type of virtual assets offered by BASP's customers, the number of customers identified by the usage of the mixers and or tumblers, the percentages of hot wallets versus cold wallet allocation, whether or not BASP accept the corporate clients as customers, and whether or not BASP offers the business payment services. And also the attributes of the counterparty BASPs, such as the geographical distribution and transaction volume, and the number on the geographical location of the virtual asset ATM, if any. Those information and figures actually help JFSA to identify and assess the risk of each registered BASPs from the ML-CFT perspectives. That's all for the regarding our regulation and monitoring and the registration for BASPs, but I'd like to talk about the new threat to our crypto industry and our society. So we have witnessed, for example, the proliferation of the strategic corruption, state-sponsored cybercrime aimed at weakening the institutions, domestic and overseas. So last year, for instance, the Department of Justice of the United States indicted 3 military hackers from no diplomatic-related country with the United States who extorted roughly $1.3 billion by lobbying the companies like Sony Pictures and stealing from wallets of the virtual assets. As FinCEN, the U.S. Treasury Department issued the ransomware trend report. It stated in just the first 6 months of the 2021, FinCEN received the 635 ransomware-related suspicious activity reports, and it's a 30% jump from the total number received all the year in 2020. In Japan, also the number of cases of the ransomware damage reported to the National Police Agency was 146 in 2021. The number was continued to increase steadily since the previous year. The damage caused by the ransomware is widespread from small to large. The majority of them is caused by the ransomware that invades the internal network of organizations through weak VPN equipment due to more work from home environment than before. The Asia-Pacific region is also being affected by a rise in organized crime, especially organized cybercrime, the rapid growth of the e-commerce, which is increasing reliance on the online transaction and services, has been accompanied by the growth of the regions, cybercrime groups. Also, ransomware attacks might be on the rise in the region, making them more prevalent now than ever before. So those are the threats that entities not only in the virtual asset industry and financial institutions, but also the entire industries, the all public and private sectors are together needed to combat with the threat of ransomware. It is not just for job of a country nor a company or a bus, but it is the one in which supervisors like us and law enforcement agencies play a key role, such as issuing the ransomware advisories and risk indicators or red flags to highlight new technology and trends and bolstering the ability of financial institutions to identify and report ransomware or new threat attack and its payments. I personally would like to alarm people about them, and thus I believe that the risk-based approach for ML-CFT regime helped many other businesses to take actions and review their own risk control framework. In October 2021, the FATF updated its 2019 guidance for risk-based approach to virtual assets and virtual assets service providers. This updated guidance forms part of the FATF's ongoing monitoring and of the virtual assets and VASP sectors. The 2021 guidance includes an update focusing on the following 6 key areas. 1, clarification of the definition of the virtual asset and VASPs. 2, guidance on how the FATF standards apply to stable coins. 3, additional guidance on the risks and the tools available to countries to address the money laundering and terrorist financing risk for peer-to-peer transactions. 4, updated guidance on the licensing and the registration of the VASPs. 5, additional guidance for the public and private sectors on the implementation of the travel rules. And 6, principle the information sharing and cooperation amongst VASP supervisors. My colleagues at JFSA, his name is Habuchi-san, is the co-chair of the virtual asset contact group under the PDG of the FATF, and JFSA is deeply involved in formulating policies and in facilitating implementation of the FATF standards on virtual assets at the FATF. But an ML-CFT control framework that merely accounts for new threat is not sufficient. In some cases, we face the same kind of the threats we always have, but they are amplified by financial innovations and new technologies, which is why we and other authorities are currently working together with Japanese Bankers Associations to implement the ML-CFT shared system with the artificial intelligence in place in the near future, in order to improve the efficiency and effectiveness, to monitor the huge number of the transactions and detect the suspicious transactions, and then submit the STR, suspicious transaction report, in a better way, more than the currently done. For example, the existing legacy transaction monitoring system often result in a production of a large volume of the false positive alerts, nearly 90%. New technologies, AI, blockchain, machine learning, have the potential to automate the work related to ML-CFT controls. But of course, it is not as simple as flipping as a switch. There are numbers of the considerations. First, it is not enough that these technologies make compliance more efficient. They also have to make it more effective, or at least keep the new system on par with that old one. Many of these machine learning and AI systems can be black boxed, and we have to be sure that these systems can perform when it comes to key metrics, like how many alerts actually lead to the STRs, or whether law enforcement finds the information actionable. So we also know that innovation will only happen if the private sector feels it has latitude to innovate. Few institutions do risk testing a new technology if they thought that test might put them in regulatory crosshairs And that is exactly what's happening sometime. As 1% report from the Financial Action Task Force is part of concluded, in some cases, it found innovation is being curtailed by concerns as to whether and how technology may be used under the FATF recommendations or in specific ML safety regulatory frameworks. GFSA is to ensuring that the space to innovate is as large and as safe it has to be. I recognize the value that technologies like AI and machine learning can have within our own operations. For example, AI to transform traditional rule-based transaction monitoring. And some of the other ideas could be seriously new approach to customer risk rating and institutional risk assessment, digital identity tools and utilities, and automating the application and filing of the STR or SARs related to certain types of the activities. But we cannot design or seriously consider these ideas without knowing how your institution would like to use them. What are you interested in building? What assurance do you need to start? What risks should be on the looked out for? This brings us the final topic that I'd like to cover today, that is the public-private partnership, where we are working together to modernize and enforce the risk-based ML CFT control framework with the new technology that I mentioned, that won't just require communicating with you in the private sector. It will require your institution communicating with the supervisors, collaborations, back and forth, like that. I'm attending over 100 outreach sessions a year in Japan, and I actually learned a lot from the voices of the private sectors at the town meeting or the outreach sessions. Finally, I'd like to ask everybody and every FIs and BASPs to implement a risk-based compliance processes tailored to the specific nature, size, risk of your business's operations. Reinforce policies and procedures with independent audits and testing as well. This is the 101 of the risk-based approach for ML safety control framework. If we work together and if we collaborate to combat new threats and adapt new technology, then I am and we are confident the regulatory framework we built will work to serve us well for all those years and many more. Thank you for hearing me out, and let's work together to make the world a better place in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozaki-san, for your opening keynote. Great to see the developments and how the industry continues to mature in Japan. I guess more importantly, how you're listening to the voices from the industry and looking to balance regulation, innovation, as well as, the broader engagement across the region.